Alan Nisbet knew a young chap who was camped up the Landsborough Valley, which is before you get to Haast, going up from the Wanaka end. And he had a tent and that, so we decided to fly in on the plane that goes in for the deer and spend a few days in there. And that was quite good. There was no seats in the aeroplane, so you just sat on the floor. And we went in, and we'd been for a few walks up the Landsborough. We hadn't actually seen anything, and we decided we'd go out and camp the night. Some nice flats there with the birch trees covering the hillside, but the flats were sort of more open. So we decided to do it. This is what we would do. Took a sleeping bag each and our 3 and I never saw a thing. Picked out where I was going to stay overnight, and she went on further down. And I never saw anything, not a sight of a deer that night, until it was just too dark to see to shoot. And then I heard an animal coming down out of the birch trees, and you could hear them crackling because it's dry under the birch. And I lay quiet, no, couldn't see to shoot him, so I thought, oh, well, that's all right. He'll be out on the flat in the morning when I wake up, you know. Took my boots off for a pillow, got into my sleeping bag, and I wasn't there very long when this stag came down and started roaring right beside me. I was lying beside a log, a fallen log, and he roared and carried on, and you could almost hear him scratching, pawing at the ground, and I guess he knew there was something there, but he couldn't identify it. Well, I think that's what it was. And I thought of having a shot at him because I could have guessed perhaps where he was, and then I thought, now, that'd be a bit silly because if I wounded him, he might be more dangerous. So I just lay quiet, and eventually he went away, and I wakened up in the morning, had a good sleep, a bit cold. In the morning, there wasn't a sign of him on the flat anywhere. I never saw one. And Helen and I had arranged she would come up and join me, and she'd got a spiky. She was carrying it, and we set out to go back to the tent. After we'd been walking for a while, she said to me, gosh, I had a funny experience last night. And I said, oh, what was that? And she said, well, she was sound asleep when this stag came, and it roared and carried on right beside her. And she said she wouldn't attempt to shoot it because, you know, because it's so dangerous. So she left it, and it was gone in the morning. She never saw it. So I said to her, well, he'd done the same with me, just too dark to shoot, and he must have gone straight down to her on the next flat. So I've never had it happen, and I've never heard of anybody that ever had that happen to them. So it was a very strange experience. Yeah. Another time Helen and I were out, and we disturbed some deer, and we had a shot each. Well, there must have been about a dozen of them in the group, and they were breaking across the sort of the horizon from us. Helen got one, and I got one, and I couldn't carry it, and I had to get Stan to go and carry it in for me. That terrible thing to have to do, go and get a man to carry my deer in, but I just couldn't manage to keep it on my back. And I never shot a deer after that. I just don't like having to get people to do my job for me. So I gave Stan the deer anyway, he got that. And when we came out of the Landsborough, we came out sitting on deer. They just, at that time, was before helicopters, they used to just throw the deer carcass into the belly of inside the plane, and if you wanted to ride in the plane, you sat on a deer, which was okay. We had good trips like that. Later on, I shot a chamois in from Haast. I'd never ever sort of got close to one, and I had to stalk it for quite a long while to get it, because there's no good shooting it unless you can get it, and it's very high, rocky country, so I had to be sure it would come down where I could get it. But I did get it, and when I got close to it, pick it up, I was so sorry I'd shot it with such a pretty little face on them. And that was the finish. I never shot another one of them either. It's much more fun pig hunting. While Helen Nisbet was at Haast, she cooked in the cook shop there for a while, and she got a very bad dose of the flu. She was working at Carter's sawmill cooking at that time, and the men said what she needed was a hot toddy. That'll fix your flu. And she had never ever touched alcohol. And anyway, they made her a hot toddy, and she had that, and that was okay. And the next day she still had the flu, so they give her another hot toddy to go to bed, you know. And you know, within a week she was an alcoholic, and she would go to bed at night and swear to herself that she would not have a drink the next day. And she said she'd get up and go down to cook breakfast, and she wouldn't be able to get through breakfast, and she'd be sneaking up to her bedroom to have a nip on the quiet. And she had to join the AA to break herself off the alcohol, and after that she dare not touch alcohol of any kind. And I went to stay with her after she shifted from Haast up to just out of Greymouth. And of course I had a flagon of sherry in the car, and I was staying overnight with her. And while she was cooking tea, I didn't know anything about this episode at the Haast. And I said to her, I'll have a sherry while you're cooking tea. And she said, no thanks, you can have one. And I said, no, I wouldn't drink on my own. But I said, I got one in the car. So that's when she told me about being an alkie, you know. And she'd never ever touched liquor before that. She was a wonderful person. She really was a great lady. But when she was living in from Greymouth, she had a motorbike, and she used to ride everywhere on her motorbike, ride into Greymouth and get her groceries and all that sort of thing. And she was going home from Greymouth one time, and she was passing a truckload of railway irons, you know, the railway that the trains run on. There was a truck with a load of them, and the chain broke, and it dumped its load and caught Helen, and she was killed. Very sad, because she was a wonderful person. Carrie and I, when we first went to Fox catching possums, that was quite different, because when I was at Haldane after Len died, the people who controlled the possum blocks took my block off me, because they said I had a widow's pension. I didn't need it, but they had people in Invercargill on the dole, and they would put them out in the block. Of course, that didn't work, because they take young chaps who had never been in the bush, never seen a possum, didn't know how to set a possum trap. But it finished my possuming at Haldane, and I rode away up the coast, west coast, because somebody told me there was plenty of possums up there, and asked for a possum block, which I got. But when I went up to view this possum block, it was too far out. It wasn't an area I could walk to. It would have taken days to get into it. Later on, it was done by other people by helicopter. So I went round and asked some of the local farmers, because there were a lot of possums there. You could see them on the roads at night. You could see the pads in the paddocks and everything. So I came home to Haldane and loaded up as many possum boards as I could, and the traps, and Kerry, and we went back. And we rented a house there, and I possumed. But first of all, of course, you catch a possum, that's all right. When you go to put it on the possum boards that we use down here, the possums up there were just too big. They just fell off the boards, and I had to get new boards cut for the possums so that I could stretch the possum skins. And I used to go round the outside of the fences on the farmer's property with traps. Up there they wouldn't let me use cyanide, because they had never had cyanide up there, and they didn't they didn't trust it. They were frightened their sheep would die and their dogs would die and all that sort of thing. and you have to respect their thoughts. So I caught possums, and Fred and Bruce came up with their wives and a couple of wee kids each and spent a holiday with me up there, which was a lot of fun because they'd go to the pub till the pub closed at night, and then they would go down the road with the 22 and the wee dog we had, and they'd shoot enough possums and take them home and skin them the next morning and stretch them and go to the pub after tea at night till it closed and go out shooting again. And they made enough to pay for their holiday, and I carried on when they went home possuming. And while I was there possuming, the Mrs. Kerr who owned the hotel asked me if I would go and work in the hotel, particularly in the laundry. She needed somebody to run the laundry, and I wasn't keen. I'd sort of, been married and reared kids and hadn't worked for a boss for many years, and I wasn't very keen. I didn't know how I'd handle that. But we talked about it, and I said, oh no, I'm going home. But she wrote to me, and she rang me down when I was home at Haldane, kept on wanting me to go up. So I said to her, well, I'll come up on condition that if I don't like it, I can say so, and if you don't think I'm satisfactory, you say so. So we agreed to that, and I worked in the laundry for a long time up there. In fact, eventually I went up in the kitchen, but it was a good place to work. But I remember one time I was down along the fence line going round my possum traps, and this possum, I reached down to catch it by the tail. You know how you catch it by the tail and pull it out straight and hit it on the head to kill it. And it had no tail. So I grabbed it and there was nothing there. And with that the possum jumped and it tore its foot out of the trap. And it started off across the paddock, and I scrambled through the fence and started running after it to catch it. And then I realised what was I going to catch? It had no tail, so I gave that up. I thought, how silly can you get? But I had punny up there for a while, and I had been getting quite a lot of skins, had them all dried, stretched and dried, so we filled the car up, Punny and Kerry and I, everything we could pack in, and just room for 2 little kids and me, and we took them down to Dunedin. They were huge skins, though, and very, very hard to get the fat off. They were very big, very fatty skins. But we made good money, and that was the end of that lot for a while. And ending up at the hotel was quite different type of work. Kerry enjoyed it. We had a room upstairs, Kerry and I, and 2 beds, and quite good. I enjoyed that there. While I was still working at the hotel, the chap who ran the helicopters sent his foreman to me and asked me if I'd go and work for him. And I said to the foreman that if Ron Connell wanted me to work for him, he could come and ask me himself. I don't like the second-hand arrangements. So eventually Ron did come, make an appointment to come and see me, and I was getting $40 a week and my keep for Kerry and I at the hotel. And Ron said to me, how much do you get here? And I said, $70 and our keep. And he said, oh, well, I'll better that. I'll give you $80 and your keep. So I went down to the helicopters, and I was cooking for about 20 men for a start. And I found that in the kitchen, if the men were talking and I came in, the talk would stop. But after I'd been there for a while, they'd carry on with their conversations, and some of them were really laughable. We had one chap working there, a Jimmy Shewan, a really nice boy, around about, I suppose he was about 26 at the time, and he was really good. He and I got on very well, and he took me for lots of free rides in the helicopter. We used to come over to me, if the shooter wasn't there on time in the morning, he'd come over and put the chopper down right at the cook shop door. Call out, come on, Elsie, you got time. And away we'd go for a little flit around the hills or out to the beach and back. And that was a lot of fun. I was a bit spoilt there, actually. And the boys used to take me out and I'd give them a hand with the deer. I remember the first time I went out shooting with them, and they were picked up some deer, shot some deer and picked them up. And when they were searching the valleys and the hills at the side of the valley, the load underneath the chopper would swing from side to side. That was as close as I ever got to being sick in a chopper. It just seemed as these deer seemed to appear right underneath you at the side and then disappear. It's a funny sensation. And they had said to me, well, we'll put you down on the flat with a few deer and you can do some gutting for me. And I said, oh yeah, that's no trouble, because I'd shot deer and I've done pig hunting all for years, Anyway, I picked up a knife and went to open a deer up the way I would do it. And Jimmy says to me, look, Alice, like this. And they just picked the belly button of the deer up and just slash right down from the belly button right down to the crutch. And then you can the whole gut just lifts out with no trouble at all. You can do it so quickly. So I got quite good at gutting deer after that. And I'm sure they thought they'd struck a real new chum when I went to do it my way. But they were a lot of good boys. Another time there, Jimmy was a shooter when I first went there. He got his pilot's license while I was there. But he went down, or coming home from a shoot, him and his pilot one time, and they saw the beach at Bruce Bay. There was a deer out on the beach, and Jimmy shot it, and he went over and picked it up and brought it back to where the chopper sat down. And when he got back there, his pilot was dead. He'd had a heart attack. So Jimmy hadn't actually flown a chopper at that time, but of course he'd been out shooting lots and lots of times. He knew what they'd done, So he put this deer in the back, and he put his pilot in the passenger seat and tied him in. And then he flew the chopper back to our base, where the helicopter base was. Then he came over to me and he says, oh, Elsie, told me what had happened. He says, what am I going to do with him? And I said, just bring him over, Jim. I says, we'll put him to bed and then we'll notify the police and all the things that we've got to do. So we done that. And it turned out they had to have a post-mortem afterwards, of course. And it turned out he had had rheumatic fever when he was a child and had damaged his heart. But they hadn't picked it up when he had his test for the chopper's license. So that was a bit of a shock. And because you're sort of living with these boys, they're just like your family. And it was always a very strenuous time when you were in control. I had the radio control in the cook shop, and I had contact with the boss in Taupo, with the foreman, with the truck drivers, and the choppers. I could call any of them up. And when the chopper went out, I knew how long they had, fuel-wise. They should be back within a given time, and then you allow a little bit extra for sit-down time if they were doing something. And if the time got a bit too much, then you'd ring the foreman and notify them and the boss in Taupo and say, well, we were a chopper overdue, And we did lose a few that way. And that was always very strenuous. And lots of times you were really worried and just they'd turn up, They'd been perhaps had extra deer to gut or something, but there were times when they didn't get home. And you couldn't help getting fond of the boys you looked after and cooked for. Another time I had some people in the motel just at the back of the cook shop. And at that time we had to generate our own power, of course, which was diesel motors over in the shed. And this lady, in the early hours of the morning, was screaming out, and I raced round to see what was wrong. And of course I had to go over to the shed and light the power up and start the motor up and switch the power on, go back to her, and her husband had died. And that was really strenuous because, well, nobody likes just an ordinary person to tell them their husband is dead. We couldn't get a doctor, we couldn't get a nurse, and all this at sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And this lady, after I got them quietened down, she had 2 teenagers with her, a boy and a girl. And I got her convinced that her husband was dead, you know. And anyway, she was sort of having a cup of tea, and then she started to cry again. And I said, "What's wrong now, dear?" And she said, "I don't want anybody to see him without his teeth in." So Jimmy just nodded to me, and he went in and put this chap's teeth in for him. But, you know, those sort of things here, they just become part of the way we are. Jimmy was, last time I heard of Jimmy, he was away down Tiano, Manapuri way, still flying a helicopter. I don't know where he is now. We've lost track of all those boys. There was John Knight, was a chap that worked with us there too. And John and his wife had broken up, and John had the little boy of about 6 or 7. And he was camped in the hut down below the hotel. And John was up at the pub this night and said to some of us, "Oh, come on down, you know, after the pub closes, come on down for a drink." And I said to him, where's the lad, you know? And he said, "Oh, he's down in the hut." So we went on down, we got there ahead of John, and he had that little kid locked in the hut. The kid was bawling his head off. He couldn't get out, you know. Didn't know how to get out. It was locked from the outside, but John had taken the key. So we talked to the little fella until John arrived, and we really gave him the works then and told him that in future if he wanted to come up for a drink, to bring the little fella with him, never to lock him in. God, if he'd lit a fire or anything, he'd have died. So, you know, things like that happen now and again. While down with the helicopter crew, the men used to often bring me in wee deer. The young ones, if they shot the mother, they'd catch the baby and bring it in. I reared a lot of deer there. Never had much trouble, only lost one that didn't survive with me. And when they opened it up, I think I must have poured the milk down the wrong way. It was full of whitish, milky-looking stuff inside. But all the rest thrived. One of the first I got was a stag, and he grew into a beautiful animal. But the next year, when I had young deer, and he had sort of got his harem sorted out, and he had a set of horns, and he would round all the deer up, the females, and keep them away from where the men were. But when I went out to feed the young ones, the new lot, he would come over, and I used to mix the milk up in a bucket and then just give them basinfuls, you know. I taught them to drink by shoving their finger in their mouth and their head in the milk, like you used to do with lambs. I never bothered with bottles and things. And this stag would come over, and he'd come and have a drink out of the bucket first, and then he'd stand back and watch me feed the young ones. But if one of the men attempted to come through the gate, he would go for them, and the men were always afraid he would turn on me, but he never ever did. But he certainly didn't like the men, and I reckoned that he thought they were after his hinds, so he was keeping the men at arm's length. But when we had radio control there, Ron, our boss from Taupo, had a girlfriend living there, and we had to stop her from using the radio because his wife in Taupo heard the strange voice and wanted to know who the other girl was. We had to make some excuse, so we had to keep her away from the radio after that. He didn't want his wife to know who she was. And but at one time she got that one of the boys brought her in a baby goat, and she reared that. And when it was old enough, she took it down to the next door neighbour who had a billy and had it served down there. And this belly goat, she brought it home, and it ended up having twins. What dirty blooming things they are. And you know, they hate rain. I don't know how they get on in the wild. I suppose they hide under rocks and things. But it would stay out in the paddock with its babies until it rained. And it would find a way to get in, and it would always come onto the porch at the cook shop. You'd open the door, and here'd be the mother goat and 2 babies and all their dung on the doorstep. God, she was a nuisance of a thing. While we were there, John Knight, the one with the little boy, he and Graham Fox were away up one of the valleys near Karamea, and they had an accident. The chopper failed with them, and they landed in the river, and Graham was very badly injured. And the chopper had come down on the side of the river, and it was raining very, very heavily, and he couldn't get Graham away from there. He couldn't do anything about it, so he ran a terrible long distance to get help, and they went in and they got with the extra men, and they got Graham just as the water was lapping up to him, and took him home and got him into hospital. He was crippled. He never walked again, but he always said he would fly. So when he got out of hospital, he was a long time in hospital, but when he got out of hospital, he came home in a wheelchair to where we were to work, and he always said, "I'll fly, don't worry." He says, "If I never walk, I'll fly." And he did. He learned to fly. He'd ride his wheelchair out to the chopper and pull himself in. It was just his legs wouldn't work. And he learned to fly again. He had to sit tests and things to prove he was okay to fly. And Jimmy Shewan took him to one of the islands. Now, I'm not sure which island it was, but it's where they specialise in acupuncture. And he took Graham over there in the hope that acupuncture might get him the use of his legs. And Graham told me that that was the sorest thing he'd ever gone through. And I didn't think acupuncture was sore, but he said it was dreadful. And I asked him if it had helped him, and he said no. He didn't think it had made any difference. But months later, and he was in bed at night, and he screamed out for me, because we had several of the men had rooms in close to where my room was. He screamed out to me, and I raced in to see what was wrong. And he says, "Elsie," he says, my feet are cold. My feet are cold." He says, "That means I can feel them." And actually, he could feel them. He couldn't move them, but he could feel them. So I don't know how much he gained after that, because he left us and went down Tiana way, and he was down there for quite a while flying, and he hit one of those guy wires they put across the valleys and crashed his helicopter and died. So that was the finish for poor old Graham. While I was up there at the helicopters, I had Karen Hunt up there for a while. And then I had Mum, and Mum was quite a bother. I took her up there to give Shirley and them a break, because Shirley had been looking after Mum for a long time. I took her down one night. She had a birthday while she was up with me, and I took her down to Haast. And one of the boy Hunts, I'm not sure which one, it might have been Colin, he was there, and I said to him, this is Gran's birthday today. So he told them in the bar, and they stood up and sang happy birthday to her, and some of them got her up to have a little dance on the floor, and she quite enjoyed that. And I used to take her up to Fox, and we'd go to the hotel and have a soft drink, and she seemed to enjoy it. She always said no, she wasn't going to go. If I said to her, "We'll go to Fox this afternoon," she'd say, "No, I won't." But when it was time to go, I'd get the lunch over and brush her hair and stick her cardigan on and say, "Come on, out you come." And she'd go. So when I went back to Dunedin and took her back to Dunedin, in front of Mum, I said to Shirley and them that Mum had enjoyed her trips out in the car, and if Bill and Shirley want to take her for a drive now, you'll be able to, because she really enjoys it. She can go with you. And she just says, "I won't." And she didn't. She was spoiled of something. While I was with the helicopter crew, I used to drive up to Greymouth and Hokitika and get my meat and groceries and things like that in the car. And, of course, they paid for my fuel and all that sort of thing. So I didn't mind that. And I love black puddings, and there's a butcher shop just this side coming out of Hokitika. And I used to call in there, and that was always my tea coming home in the car. I'd have a couple of black puddings. The washing machine broke down one time while I was down at the helicopter crew, and the foreman went into town and brought me back a twin tub, and I went crook because there's no way I could do the work I was doing and still work a twin tub, because you've got to stand over them, shift the washing from the one place to the other and so on. And anyway, he reckoned that was all right. So as soon as the boss from Taupo came down, I said to him that was it. I wasn't going to put up with that. And he just said to the foreman, "You get that machine in the truck and take it straight back to Greymouth and get this woman a decent washing machine." So I was right after that. One night while I was there was a carload man and his wife and 3 kids pulled in. And it was raining cats and dogs, as it can up there. And they'd come through without booking anywhere into any of the hotels, and there wasn't a place open. And they drove as far as we were, which was 22 miles south of Fox. And they came and knocked on my door, and I didn't have an empty motel either, but I didn't have any men there at the time. So I brought them in and said to them, "Now look, if you don't mind just sleeping in the house," I said, "it's not a motel, but I said, I'll change the beds and put an extra one in for one of the kids." I said, "if you'll be satisfied with that." And one kid was sick. So they were very pleased with that. So I just changed the beds and made them a cup of tea first and something to eat, and left them having that while I went and changed the beds. And they settled down, because you have to, because the power used to go off at 11 o'clock unless there was any reason to have it on. And they got up the next morning and were taking the little girl on through to Wanaka to the doctor. But she was better in the morning. And I wouldn't charge them motel rates, but they gave me some money just to try and cover it. I said I couldn't charge them because it wasn't a motel. And they were very nice people, but years later at Wanaka, I met that lady again. And she said, "Wait a minute, I got something for you. I've been watching for you everywhere we go." And she gave me this parcel, and it was a little glass candlestick with one candle in it. I've still got that. Going back to the hotel for a moment, I don't know if I've told you about the chap that got electrocuted. I'll have to think about that. You see, I forget. I should write these things down, but I don't. But I'll just have to go back through that other tape and have a look, I think. Now, while we were at the hotel, which the hotel had a similar diesel generator that we had down at the helicopter company, and it was used as a standby if the power went off. And one day the electrician was up on fixing up the diesel motor in the shed right opposite the wash house, and he started the motor up and climbed up the ladder onto the pole outside the laundry door to check the motor or switch it on. And he switched it on, and the motor started to labour, and he knew it was going to blow the motor up, so he threw the switch with his bare hand and got electrocuted. That was scary. He just lit up just like blue, like a blue body, blue man, and he just slowly fell off the pole, hit the corner of the shed, and fell to the ground. And I think it seemed to happen in slow motion. I think by the time he hit the ground, I was up at the office calling for help for him, and the guide, Seamus, was there, and he raced down and said, "Don't touch him." He said, "If you try and resuscitate him before you massage his heart to get it moving, you would do damage." So we got him in the plane, and 20 minutes later we had him in the hospital at Greymouth. He survived for a year or two. He did die eventually. I think his heart gave out, but he was very badly burned. That was a frightening thing, really, to see that happen. You wouldn't believe a man could live after seeing that sort of thing happen. It was just terrible. And another thing that happened there one day, which was much funnier, was Kerry had a little dog, and the pigeons used to come in quite round the hotel and that, and this pigeon must have sat down on the ground to have a drink of water, I think, at the drain, and the dog spotted it, and it grabbed the pigeon, and the pigeon was trying to get away, and the little dog's trying to hold it, and all the dog got was a mouthful of feathers, and the pigeon lost a lot of feathers, but the pigeon did get away, and that was rather strange. I've never seen a wee dog trying to handle a pigeon before, but it managed. Pigeon got flea, and he was right. And we'd done a lot of laundry while I was working in that laundry, and one day I had 360 sheets on the line. That's without the pillow slips. It was mainly sheets. And left them out overnight because I didn't get them dry, and a big storm came up and blew the lines down. We only had 3 or 4 sheets torn, but the rest were down in the grass, so the whole lot had to be washed again, and that was a big job. But I've got slides and photos of the clotheslines loaded up, and with me carrying in loads and loads of sheets. But the girls were good. They used to come and help me a lot, and I used to help them. I often wish I was capable of doing the same work now. But of course I'm not. You do get older, don't you? I flew over with one of the engineers in the one We-72 to Dunedin one time, and coming back over Mount Cook we had a job to get high enough, and when we got over on the west coast side of Mount Cook there was too much fog and we couldn't get down, and the pilot wasn't very happy because when you can't see the ground and you might not be able to climb back over the hill to the clear side, but he decided to fly out to sea. So we went away out to sea, and then you could come in under the fog, and that was quite an interesting thing to do, because when you're looking down and there's no holes in the fog, it can be a bit of a worry. But this boy just knew what he was doing, and we got home quite safely. And another time we had a scary trip up there, going up through Wanaka, up through the lakes. And there was another, we always put in a flight plan so that everybody knows you're in the area, and there was a plane flying around with no flight put out for him. And sometimes he was over the top of us, and sometimes he was under us, and sometimes he'd be away out to the side, and you never knew whether he could see you. We only saw him every now and again, but we didn't know whether he was seeing us. And even though the sky's a big place, it's very easy for planes to collide, if you don't know there's one around. So that was a bit scary, but we did get back up through Wanaka and over into Haast and back up the coast that way, and which seemed to be the safest way to go, because the plane seemed to be over in the Hawaii area more than anywhere else. So there was a report put in about that plane, so that plane, when they found out who it was, would be told about not putting in a flight plan. It can be so dangerous. But most of the men were, the pilots and that, were good people. Kerry had a few trips with them. We went away up to Hawaii with one of them one time, and was quite upset when he came home because Mum had died, and he hadn't got down to see her again before she died, but that's just the way things happen. And anyway, Jet, that's about all for that tape, I think. I hope this one works out better than that one that was so belly noisy. I'll try and tape over that and see if it works. Good night.